Woo. Trying to find my way, 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 trying to find my way. I'm trying, change me.
My faith is in God alone, beyond a reasonable doubt. This brainstorm pouring rain on your season of drought. Just trying to lay a couple seeds in the mouth. Thanks for listening. You ever get the feeling you was...
What up, y'all? It's your hometown hero, Scott Lane, the Black Bruce Wayne, a.k.a. the real Adam Coleman. So, you rocking with Tru-ID. What is Tru-ID? Well, you know, there's been a lot of talk about race, religion. Is Christianity the white man's religion? How can Christianity be, reconciled with, my African heritage or ethnicity? Is there some type of conflict there? What's going on with the Hebrew Israelites? Kemet. A lot of people talk about Kemet. All these types of things. Well, I've been thinking about these questions, been thinking about these topics quite a bit, actually. And we'll get to that. Today we're just kind of free flowing. I'm just kind of talking. This is my first episode. Got a lot of information I want to cover over the coming weeks and months and, maybe even years. But let me backtrack for a second. Tell you a little bit about myself and, maybe I'll kind of get some clarity as to, what we're doing here. So, as for me, I came up in church. Every Sunday, me, my mom, my dad, and my sister, that's where we were. Church was, just what we did. Christianity, as far back as I can remember, was just a natural part of life. But, more than that, my parents, I can honestly say, as much as I could tell, they really lived out, or at least tried to live out the sermons that we heard on Sunday. They tried to live it out Monday through Saturday. So, church and, Christianity wasn't just something that we, did on Sunday. It wasn't just like an event that we attended once a week. It was a lifestyle. Christianity was what we knew. I prayed together with my parents. We would read the Bible together. It was just a part of, our lives. They made it real for me, right? So, my parents kept me and my sister in church, but they also kept us in books too. So, it was very important to my parents, that we study Black history. Why is that? Well, because if left to the school system, the school system, public school system, they just do a piss poor job of teaching, African American history, let alone African history, but, at least, even African American history. They just don't teach it really. Of course, once a year, you got February, but, so-called Black History Month. They might give you, of course, Harriet Tubman, Dr. Martin Luther King, of course, somebody like that. If you have a teacher that's going above and beyond, and they might even give you, Garrett Morgan or, Thurgood Marshall, maybe even a Benjamin Banneker. But, for the most part, they just don't really delve into Black history for real. As far as, if left to the school system, all I would have known was that, pretty much my history started with the cotton fields, right? Because, Black history is always taught, at least in the school system, is always taught within the context of slavery and, the civil rights movement. So I guess we just, started on the cotton fields and then blam, here we are. It's kind of how it would seem. But, so my parents, they would have us, during the summertime or, school breaks and stuff like that. We would have to read. We would have to read biographies of different Black inventors, different explorers and, Black cowboys I recall reading about, poets and writers and so forth. We'd have to read up on these different folks and then give a report, to my parents as far as, what we learned. And, quite frankly, at first I hated it, because, it's summertime, I'm like the only person, still reading, like everybody else is playing outside and, doing this or whatever. But, my parents still had us doing work, man. It's like, oh, this is still work. But I came to appreciate it, later on. I understood. Now I certainly understand. But anyway, they kept us in books. That was just an important part of something that they instilled in us, that you got to know your history, and I thank God they did. One thing is kind of interesting. I've kind of been thinking about this recently. Growing up, one aspect of Black history, African American history, that I found interesting was the Harlem Renaissance. It's just that era like really stuck out to me. Just the playwrights, the jazz musicians, the poets. It was just something about that era, that just really stuck out to me. Just like really grabbed my imagination. I guess that being said, now I think about it, when I was a kid, we grew up, we would watch, old movies, like Stormy Weather, Cabin in the Sky, I still remember the Nicholas brothers, two tap dancers back in the day. They was going at it. So like we grew up, I'm talking about maybe, 5, 6, 7 years old, we grew up watching those things. And so it's just something about that era always kind of stuck with me, in terms of being an area of interest. But then I think it's partly because I paralleled, the Harlem Renaissance with my own experience. I'm an 80s baby. I grew up in the 80s. And by the time I was about 10 or so years old, the hip hop culture was kind of coming into its own. And I kind of saw a parallel, I think, between the Harlem Renaissance and the hip hop culture. You have an explosion of fashion, again, music, the arts just in general, dance, it's just these innovations going on within the hip hop culture that I kind of felt mirrored in a sense what was going on with the Harlem Renaissance all those years before. And so I guess maybe I just kind of saw myself as being in this new kind of like a new Harlem Renaissance, So I just kind of figured that was cool, but I just kind of drew that parallel. But anyway, hip hop, like I said, I came up in the 80s and 90s. Hip hop was coming into its own. I mean, I just love the culture. I love the expression. I love the artistry. Lyricism, and authenticity actually mattered then. You know what I'm saying? Like you actually had to, be spitting something. You couldn't just get up there with a beat, hot beat or whatever, and some kiddish type lyrics and think you was really gonna do something. Like, I love lyricism, And I was kind of like one of those guys that I guess these terms don't even really matter now. But back when I was a kid, commercial rap versus conscious rap. Like I didn't really rock with the commercial type rappers. For me, I was more so of a conscious rap guy. I listened to my favorites, I guess you could say, would be Common, Guru, oh man, Mos Def, De La Soul, Tribe Called Quest. Those type of cats. Of course, Wu-Tang without question. MCs who was actually, communicating the message, Man, it's funny, actually, half the time, like, I think perfect example would be Wu-Tang. I mean, I could spit their lyrics, word for word, and had no clue what them cats was talking about. I was like, I just thought it was hot, it just sounded hot. So, but I didn't know what them cats was talking about. And what's interesting, I didn't really think about it until I got to college, but in the music, in the lyrics, and again, I'm thinking about Wu-Tang. I was a big fan of theirs, and just some of the guys I used to listen to. A lot of the underground cats, Raucous Records and whatnot. Anyway, there was just this religious content to the message that I'd heard it, but I didn't really hear it, until I really got to college. I just hadn't really thought about it, and I guess what kind of what brought it to life for me, even though, like I said, I'd heard it, but I guess what made it tangible, in a sense, was, when I got to college, I ran across some people of, different religions, which wasn't necessarily unusual, but they were like kind of like Afrocentric religions, that I hadn't really encountered before. Like I had never heard of a 5%er until I got to VCU, shout out to Virginia Commonwealth University, go Rams. But yeah, I'd never heard of a 5%er, before I got to college. God Body, that was big, at the time. Of course, I'd heard of Islam, but I just never really, I grew up listening to, Rakim and some of these other guys, and I would hear him mention, like Islamic, kind of phraseology, but I just never really paid any attention. But, I started meeting people who were kind of into these like pro-black or maybe just, I guess I'll just, say Afrocentric, religions, and, that kind of, brought to light, like, hey, that's what these guys are talking about. I met with some 5%ers. They kind of broke down, some of the things that the Wu-Tang guys were saying. So I was like, oh, okay, that's what it means. I had just never really paid attention. I just like the music, So, I can't really say I really thought about it all that deeply at the time, but I guess somewhat recently, in recent years, last couple of years, with some of the conversations and dialogues that I find myself in, on social media, I've kind of been brought back to that experience. I've kind of been brought back to that. It's like, wow, I'm interfacing with some of these beliefs, and I guess maybe I know a little bit more about just world religions in general. So I guess these type of dialogues are now more meaningful. But, it was kind of that sense again, going back to my days in college, like being faced with uh, these other religions that profess to be more black than Christianity. It was the first time I really was confronted by somebody that suggested, that Christianity was the white man's religion and really challenged me on it. Um, Up until then, I just really hadn't thought about it really, at least not in that context. And of course, I thought about slavery and it was messed up and all that kind of stuff. Because, like I said, I was into history, but I never really saw my Christian faith as being at odds with my ethnicity on the basis of slavery until I got to college and people were kind of, putting that forward. And again, like I'm saying, like now, I mean, I think that's the conversation that we're having now, a lot online and, just, I think it's just in the air, so to speak, And so, again, just running into people, on Facebook and, Twitter or what have you, starting to see, these types of discussions, more. I mean, now, of course, you have with the so-called consciousness community and, they're putting out a lot of information, just from different angles. But again, it's just this kind of sense that, Christianity is at odds with my ethnicity, really trying to confront that. So, been asking myself some hard questions. Anybody can, scroll through a news feed and you see, it might be that one meme, where they got the guy from Roots, Kunta Kinte, and the slave masters whipping him. And then the caption is like, this is how, black people became Christians, stuff like that, you can't miss stuff like that, or for whatever reason, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff on YouTube, people post maybe something from YouTube or, maybe it might be a Hidden Colors video, but they raise a lot of questions, that I think need answering. And I just kind of been grappling with them. And so, being on this this path, this journey of trying to, gain an understanding of these things, I found myself one Sunday sitting down with a priest at a Coptic Orthodox church, right? Coptic is just another word for, Egyptian. You can kind of use it interchangeably there. So anyway, I'm at this Coptic Orthodox church, so how did I get there? A couple of weeks, prior, I just been looking on the internet and I came across that video where maybe 20 or so, I think maybe it was like 21 maybe, Coptic Christians were beheaded by ISIS. And, I'm watching this video and each of these guys, as they're facing their death, they shout out something, something to the effect, that Jesus is Lord. And to shout out Jesus is Lord as you're losing your life, it's something, it just struck something within me. It's just like, wow, it was just really, really profound, and for whatever reason, I don't know. I had seen Coptic Christians before, you kind of see them, they're walking through, their churches with the robes and they got the I don't know what you call them, but the mist coming out of the thing or whatever. Anyway, it was like, I kind of grew up. I mean, I had heard of them, but I was like, well, they're just kind of on some other stuff. I don't know why I never really associated them with being Christians in the same sense that I was a Christian. They were kind of just other. But it was something about that video that made me say, dang, they're Christians too. It's kind of dumb. I mean, of course they are, but yeah, they're Christians too. They really believe in the same God that I believe in, And so it led me to do some research, on the Coptic Church. Now I had already been, reading up on, the church in Egypt. Which dates back to within the first century, A.D. Maybe within 50 to 100 years of Jesus' resurrection. Dating back that far. I've been studying that kind of thing. I had read about Ethiopia. And how it's actually, I believe it to be the first Christian nation, so to speak. I've been reading up on these things. But then, this incident got me curious about the Coptic Church. So, anyway, long story short, I looked it up, in the local, phone book. Well, nobody uses phone books anymore, obviously, but, I don't know, yellowpages.com or whatever that is, and I found a church, a local, Coptic church, called up the priest and said, hey, I would like to come check you guys out. And, so he said, hey, cool, come check us out on a Sunday or whatever. I get down there. I actually was late, CP time or whatever. So I missed the actual service. But the pastor, the priest, rather, was real cool and, was willing to meet with me afterwards. So So let me back up for a second. So as I pull up to this church, this Coptic church, you know, I ride up and I see these kids. I mean, they're playing soccer outside, you know, running around. You got this dude who's playing some music. You got, you know, somebody's on the grill cooking out. You know, it was just like this really big, you know, everybody just having a good time. You know, I'm thinking, okay, this must be like their, you know, annual church picnic or something like that, you know. And so I get out, you know, and, just I'm walking towards the church. And, you know, I'm kind of getting the side eye, you know what I mean? People didn't, you know, recognize me or whatever, you know. But anyway, I'm like, hey, you know, whatever, you know, I'm here. I know I'm about peace, and you know, hopefully they'll be cool with me just showing up like this. So anyway, I'm walking into the church, and I'm talking to one of the one of the younger guys, you know, about maybe 20s, 30s or whatever. And you know, he just told me, hey, this is how we are every Sunday. You know, every Sunday is, you know, you got kids running around playing soccer and eating food and all. It was just like this big family reunion, you know. And he's like, yeah, this is every Sunday. I'm like, wow, you know, that's pretty dope. You know, it was just like this real communal feel. You know what I'm saying? Like there was a bunch of different families, but you would think that they were like all one family, you know. So anyway, you know, so I'm waiting for the priest, and you know, a couple guys come up, you know, talking to me, asking me some questions, and I realized they were sizing me up to make sure that I wasn't a threat, you know, which I guess is very real. You know, the Coptic Church actually has a long history of sustaining terrorism, you know, in Egypt. So, and many of these folks were ethnically Egyptian and had been only in the States for a very short time. So that, you know, terrorism is real to them, you know. So, you know, they asked me questions, making sure I'm not some, you know, some crazy dude or whatever. And it was just really cool, man. I guess, you know, they kind of let the guard down eventually. We were just able to kick it a little bit. You know, the pastor, you know, he's doing his thing, meeting with different members. And, you know, so I held on for a while. So I finally get a chance to sit down with this priest, you know. And again, I've been doing some studying, and you know, I'm asking myself all these questions about, you know, is Christianity the white man religion and all this and that. So I wanted to ask him, you know. I think at this point, the priest had only been in America for maybe 5 months or so. He was relatively new to that parish. I don't know if they use that term parish or not, but that location, you know, he had just got in the States. And so I got all these questions, man. I want to ask him some hard questions and see what he has to think about it. And what's just so interesting is that, you know, as I'm walking into his office, I'm looking around, I'm seeing, you know, all these different, you know, pictures of different saints and different people. You know, one guy they got on the wall, Moses the Black, you know. Then you have, I think they had Athanasius, and, you know, we'll get into who these people are at a later time. But just these different African, you know, saints and notable people in church history. And I read up on some of them, so I recognize some of the names. So I get in, I'm asking this priest, hey, you know, a lot of people are saying that Christianity is the white man's religion. Like, you know, what do you think about that? And as it was coming out of my mouth, you know, here I'm talking to this guy who, mind you, had just finished telling me how, you know, the Egyptian church, the Coptic church, had been around in Egypt from like 100 AD, you know, and had managed to survive the even the Muslim invasion, had sustained all this time. And so I kind of felt stupid, actually, even asking him the question, is Christianity the white man's religion? I'm talking to a guy who is part of a long line of Christians going all the way back to in Africa to within a century of Jesus' resurrection. So anyway, I asked him this question, and he just like, he wasn't angry, but it was kind of like this confused, like, what do you mean is Christianity the white man's? Like, that's just preposterous. And he begins to quote John 3:16 to me, you know, for God so loved the world that whosoever shall believe in him. You know, it just kind of, he just goes for it, you know. And so it was just like, I don't know, he kind of basically just sunned me. It's like, oh, that's just ridiculous. And so anyway, I kind of explained to him that in America, you know, that's a real issue, you know. And so we had a really good talk, man. We had a really good talk. And it was just a blessing to be, I think, in contact with that type of heritage, you know. Quite frankly, with, you know, up until the last couple of years, I hadn't really studied church history, you know. But here I was sitting in a church that was had roots, you know, going back for thousands of years. You know, it was just a really powerful experience. I mean, even when I walked out of his office, again, I'm looking around at the different pictures, and it was just something about it that just clicked for me that you know, Christianity is ancient. You know, this is not something that just came on the block. And in addition to that, I mean, it's not something that just popped up, when slavery came about. You know what I mean? Christianity has about, at this point, well, just about 2,000 years of history on the continent of Africa, with about 1600 of that coming before the transatlantic slave trade. And it's just something about this experience, meeting with this priest and talking about these things, hashing it out, that made that history just more tangible to me. I felt like some healing, occurred, in the sense that, I mean, I'd been rooted in Christ. I mean, confident in, he's real and all that kind of stuff. But I felt that the African part of me was more at home, in Christianity, after really looking at church history and sitting down talking with this priest and just having this experience. So I left really, really feeling encouraged. And I guess it's those types of experiences that have birthed, Tru-ID. So again, what is Tru-ID? Well, let's start with the acronym. Tru-ID stands for the real you, Imago Dei. Imago Dei being the Latin for image of God. I'm gonna dig into that next episode in terms of kind of what's behind that name and how that name came about and whatnot. So I'm gonna skip over that right now. But as far as the podcast goes, Tru-ID is a podcast wherein we hope to explain and defend the Christian faith, particularly in regards to objections to Christianity and areas of concern pertaining to Christianity that are of interest to people of African descent. We don't want to be exclusive, so we're going to have a little something for everybody. We'll be talking about just defending the faith in a broader context. But our area of focus will be the types of things that you do find kind of in urban areas being a sticking point or a barrier, in terms of people receiving the gospel or holding on to their faith. We're going to be kind of digging into that. There's a lot of questions out there. You can just scroll through, your Facebook feed and see, was Jesus a remake of Horus? Is the Bible a remake of pagan myths from Egypt or Greece or Rome or whatever people want to claim? We want to address some of that stuff. Jesus never existed. The letter J didn't exist until 1500 or so therefore Jesus didn't exist. Stupid stuff like that. We want to kind of break those things down and give a rational response to those types of objections. But then also among the so-called consciousness community online, there's a lot of material out there through YouTube, a lot of articles being written, that pose challenges, to Christianity. So we want to kind of address those as well. We'll probably dig into some of the Hidden Colors stuff. I know Hidden Colors 4 just dropped, so I'm probably take a look at that and see what they're talking about. But even in some of the Hidden Colors videos, there are some objections to Christianity there. That's a popular documentary series. So we want to take a look at that as well and see if we can give a rational response, to those types of things. Let's take a look at some of the upcoming shows, just a few of them, just to kind of give you a little flavor of what we're going to get into. I got one show that I'm developing now, 20 plus facts that challenge the notion that Christianity is the white man's religion. That's going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. We're going to be doing a 2 or 3 part series on the Hebrew Israelites. I grew up in church, like I said, so, pastors always doing a series on something. So we're going to do a series on the Hebrew Israelite heresies. And, of course, we're going to talk about Egypt, like I mentioned, the whole Horus thing. We're going to break that down a little bit, covering some common objections that people might find online, as they're, on their Facebook feed, those types of things you might run into. We want to, give some answers there. Let's see, slavery, obviously, we definitely going to be digging into that real heavy. Real heavy. We're going to talk about Christianity, during slavery times among the slaves and also, among the Caucasians at the time, and just kind of digging into that. What did that look like? And then I believe next week or next episode, I should say, I think we're going to dig into this identity issue. And all of these discussions, I just feel like identity is right there at the core in terms of issues that we need to address. So we're going to be dealing with that. But that being said, that's just the stuff that I plan on covering. But we also have a bunch of guests, lined up. We have a variety of folks from professors to pastors, Christian apologists, all ready to go, ready to, chime in and bring what they have to the table. Just want to give people an opportunity to share with us what's on their plate, so we can learn as well. So also, what we want to take a look at is, backtracking a little bit, like I've been kind of alluding to. We want to investigate, is Christianity at odds with, African heritage or African ethnicity or what have you. But that being said, I mean, the other piece we want to cover is if Christianity is false, then, it really doesn't matter if Christianity is at odds with African heritage or whatnot, because if it's false, then you shouldn't mess with it anyway, right? In addition to those other types of questions, we want to take a look at, is there evidence for God? What is the evidence that God exists? We want to take a look at defenses for the Christian faith, defenses for Christianity particularly. We want to also want to delve into clarity on Christian doctrine. I'm not a professional theologian, but I'll give it my best shot. Basically, what I mean by that is I think that when you're on the web, I mean, people just, when they attack Christianity, half the time they don't even know what they're attacking. Like, they don't really know what it is that Christians actually believe, particularly things like the Trinity, the deity of Christ, topics like that. You constantly get these straw man arguments and, that where people accuse Christians of, well, you believe this, you believe that, and that's false. Well, and then they get our beliefs wrong, and then they attack those wrong beliefs. You know what I'm saying? So, and quite frankly, I mean, to be blunt, I mean, I think that the problem is within the church. There is a lack of knowledge, amongst Christians in terms of what they believe. I say to people all the time that, unfortunately, churches don't teach theology most of the time. Churches, on an average Sunday morning, they teach life lessons that may have theological foundations, but they don't actually teach theology. You know what I mean? Like, what are the doctrines that are foundational to the faith? So as a result, I mean, you have a lot of folks who believe this or believe that, and just in terms of Christians, and they just don't know what they're talking about. So we want to clarify some things, in terms of Christianity. What do Christians believe? What is Orthodox Christian doctrine? So, among other things, I mean, I definitely want to, equip people, with a heavy dose of information that will help them to defend their faith, in Christ, against, particular challenges that I think are, some of which are specific to the African American community. And I don't even want to say just African American, because, I think we're starting to see some things, certainly in England and some other places. But quite frankly, if you're listening to the show, you probably already know what I mean, when I'm talking about these types of things, but those challenges to Christianity that, again, are particular, to the African community abroad. Maybe that's a better way of saying it, And what I mean by that, I'm thinking about things like, people bring up Horus and Kemet and, some of the stuff I was talking about before, the hidden colors, type of stuff. We want to address those things. So, but, not only that, though, I also want to educate people who may not be, of African descent and who are interested in defending the faith and may come across, these types of questions. And because, these questions may not be on their radar all that often, they may not know, or may not have a way of addressing them, if it comes their way. So we also want to give people an opportunity to learn about some of the challenges that are particular to the African American community or African community abroad, and equip them as well, so that if they come in contact, with some of these belief systems or ideologies that we're going to be breaking down, that they will have a reasonable response. And so, anyway, I was listening to this one particular apologist. Won't say his name, but he's a pretty well-known guy. I love it. He has a lot of good material, and he was doing a Q&A, and a question came up about Egypt, about Kemet. And based on the way that the question was phrased, I kind of knew where the questioner was coming from, but I could kind of see that, again, this apologist, gave a good answer, but it was just an unfamiliar type of a question that I think the apologist doesn't, this particular guy doesn't interface with too much, and then it just kind of stuck in my mind a little bit. And then a couple months later, I'm listening to another Christian apologist, and, he's preparing to go, deal with a particular group, and he's anticipating that the issue of the white man's religion, so-called white man's religion is going to come up. So he's, giving some answers about that. And he gave some really good answers, but there was a component that I felt was missing. There's a matter of the soul, that I think needs to be engaged, with these questions. So in addition to some of the philosophical kind of intellect type of stuff, there's a matter of the soul that needs to be addressed. And so I just kind of thought about that. And, I actually started writing this apologist a letter. And, I was just going to say, hey, man, I appreciate you for, what you're doing, all this kind of thing. But, hey, you might want to watch out for this, these types of questions, the white man's religion type stuff. And here's some things you might want to think about. And as I was kind of midway through the letter, actually I probably got about 75% of the way through writing. I was about to send it. And it just hit me. It's like, well, why don't you do something about it? Why go to this guy over here? There's nothing wrong with, obviously encouraging and equipping one another in the Lord and whatnot. But if you're aware of it and you have some information that may be a benefit, why don't you do something about it? And so, kind of here we are. Actually, at first I started, writing a book, and I'm still in the process of writing a book on these sorts of things. And then I started, recording a video, kind of vlog, I guess you can call it. And then it just, one thing led to another. I was like, well, I'm gonna do a podcast. People will listen to a 45, 30-minute podcast, but, may not watch a 45, hour-long video. So I was like, well, let's put it on a podcast, something that, people can listen to while they're jogging or, whatever. So that's kind of what brought us about here, So, I'm new to this, and I plan on being around for a while. Certainly a lot to talk about, a lot to cover. So just hope and pray that y'all, stay tuned, man. Ride with me. Again, this is just it's a journey, man. I don't have all the answers for sure. So let's learn together. All right. With that said, Tru-ID, episode 1 in the book, signing out. See y'all next time. Peace.